All right, in this segment, we're going to be talking about slide number 9 to begin with. Now, if you recall our discussion of the model of human communication, you remember that there were 3 channels that we identified that comprise the message that we communicate to the members of our audience. And in this section, we're going to talk about each one of those components of our message and see what we can do to become more expert in communicating in each one of those areas. All right, so if you think back, we had 3 channels. What were those channels? Who can name a channel for me? Okay. Yeah, just call it out. Yeah, visual channel. Okay, what's another channel? Okay, vocal channel. And what was the third V? Verbal channel. Now, if you imagine this circle, well, I guess it's not quite a circle, but I did ask you to use your imagination. If you view this circle as comprising 100% of your message, I want you to think about how you would divide these 3 components up to 100%. So is it 33%, 33%, 33%? 50%, 25, 25? Okay? So what I'd like you to do is just think about that for a moment and call out. So let's take the vocal channel first. Now, what would you guess? So the vocal aspect, as you recall, is the tone of voice that we use, the volume that we use, the pace at which we speak. Okay, so what do you think? Okay, 15%. I heard 25. 9%. Okay. What else? Another guess? 33. All right, take the easy route here. Okay. All right, let's switch over. That's our guesses for the vocal channel. Right now, let's take a look at the verbal channel, the words we use. Okay, what would you guess that percentage would be? Oh, 75%. What else? 60%. 43 and a half. Okay. Be nice and specific there. Any other guesses? 80%. All right. Okay, now let's go over to the visual channel. Right, so we have 2 components. We have a third component left. So what would you guess would be the percentage associated with the visual channel? Okay, 30%, 25, yes, 43, any other guesses? 91, okay, let's go for the big numbers. All right, now, as you might have guessed, there has been some research done on this. And I'm going to share the numbers with you that came out as a result of that research. So let's take a look at the slide, and let's look at the verbal percentage according to this research. Verbal, 7%. Now you might find these a little surprising, but we'll chat about that in a moment. Okay, vocal percent, 38%. Visual, 55%. Now, as I mentioned, this is done as a result of research that was done by a psychologist named Albert Morabian. He's a professor at University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. And he did this research back in the 1970s, if you can imagine. He's now 84 years old. He's still a professor emeritus there. And he published the results of his research in a book called Silent Messages. And he was really a student of nonverbal communication. And he wanted to emphasize the importance of nonverbal communication in the entire message that we deliver to the people that we're interacting with, whether it be a message when we're talking just one-on-one, or in a small group discussion, or a large audience. Now, there's been a lot of discussion around this in the intervening years since 1972, when this research was published, about the validity of the numbers. And my point here today is not to, I guess, argue in favor of 7, 38, 55, right? Those numbers are just numbers, right? But the issue that I want, or lesson, I guess, that I want you to take away from this is that the message that we communicate in the classroom is made up of multiple components. Now think about it. When you rehearse a presentation, what is it that you typically rehearse the most? Yeah, you go over the words that you're going to say. Now, according to Morabian, that makes up 7% of your total message. How much time do we spend, thinking about our presentations as we are rehearsing how we appear in front of the audience? Okay, that 55%. How much do we think about our gestures, our posture, our facial expressions, all those things that go into making up the visual component of our message? Typically, I know before I was exposed to the research by Morabian, I spent the vast majority of my time rehearsing the words, but not really, how I was going to say them vocally, or visually how I was going to come across to the audience. And again, as I started to say earlier, the actual percentages are really not as consequential as having the realization that there are multiple components that go into the way that we communicate with our audiences, and that if we're going to properly prepare and be as effective communicators as we can, we need to be proficient in both, or all three, the vocal, the verbal, and the visual channels. Okay, so that all three of those components go into our total message, as we discussed in our model of human communication. Okay, well now we're going to go to slide number 10, and we're going to talk about visual in particular. So what makes up the visual channel, or a visual impact on the audience? And as you can see from the slide, there are a number of bullet points up there that refer to our posture, the way that we stand in front of the audience, if we're upright or hunched over. The stance that we have, if we're standing with our hand on our hip, looking kind of casual or maybe overly informal, depending on the type of audience that we have. The gestures that we use, are gestures small or are they expansive? Our dress, what's the rule of thumb when it comes to an instructor's dress in the classroom? Okay, so we're going to talk about that as well. And then we're going to discuss facial expressions, okay? So how do we look in front of the group? I'm embarrassed to say that, when I first got into teaching and corporate training, I got the feedback very early on that, you look like you're in pain when you're up there in front of the group. And, and the fact of it is, at that time, I wasn't aware of the way that I, looked, from a standpoint of facial expressions in front of the group. But when I got that feedback, it really opened my eyes that, because I was having a good time in front of the group, I just didn't look like it. And I was not communicating the message that I really wanted to communicate to my audience. And then we'll talk about movement strategies within the classroom. Where should we be positioned in the classroom? You know, I'm a big fan of using a presentation remote all the time. Okay, this is how we should present because it frees us from being, you know, close to a keyboard or a computer when we're in the classroom, so that we can circulate to all parts of the classroom. And then our last topic we'll talk about is to lectern or not to lectern. Okay, should we be using a lectern or not? Okay. All right, let's take a look at the next slide. So let's talk specifically about our stance up in front of the group, our posture. So our posture should be upright. I guess I can show you a profile here. Upright as I can be. Okay, so we want to have an upright, alert-looking profile and posture in the classroom, and we should practice that. Okay. Now, what I would like to do is we're going to go over what we call in training either the primary stance, as it says up on the slide, or the another name for it is a neutral stance. So, if you would, I'd like everyone to stand, if you're able. Okay. And okay, now I want you to adopt a nice upright posture. Now, the primary stance is basically where you stand with your feet about shoulder width apart. Okay? Everybody got that? Shoulder width apart. Nice upright posture. And then we're going to take one foot, whichever foot you're most comfortable with, right foot or left foot. For me, it's the left foot. And then I put my left foot where the ball of my left foot is even with the toe of my right foot. Okay? So they're slightly offset like this, right? So the ball of this foot is aligned with the toes of this one, if I can do that right. Okay, so do that. Now, why do we want you to? Why do we suggest that you adopt a primary stance or a neutral stance? Well, it's because this is a great position. It's a restful position. It's easy to move in one direction or the other. It helps us maintain our balance better in the classroom. If our feet are parallel, it's easier to get off balance if one foot is slightly advanced. It gives you a more stable platform to present from. And, you know, when I first got into the training field, I'd be watching TV at home and I would practice the primary stance, right? So it would feel comfortable to me. It would be natural to me. So when I got into the classroom, it would feel very natural. Now, as we're standing, one thing, you know, make sure that your knees are just like slightly bent, not down like this, but not locked either. You want just a little bend in your step. So it makes it easy for you to move around the room. And it's more comfortable, especially if you're standing for extended periods of time during a class. Okay, so that's our primary stance. All right, go ahead. You can sit down for a moment, and I'll launch into our discussion of gestures. Now, gestures are extremely important in the classroom. It's one of our primary forms of nonverbal communication. Okay, and you know it's important to really plan our gestures and think about them when we are communicating with an audience. All right, and you know the reason for that is that this makes us a bigger presence or a smaller presence in the classroom. Now, the thing we have to keep in mind with regard to gestures, just kind of the overriding principle, is that gestures need to match the size of the venue in which you're presenting. Okay? So if you are in a smaller room, then you can use smaller gestures. It's the same thing if I were like sitting down having coffee with you or something, and if I were gesturing like this and in a Starbucks and say, "Wow, what a great time I had yesterday. It was amazing." Okay, it would be inappropriate. Well, the same thing's true when we're in a large space, presenting in a large classroom, and if our gestures are like this, okay, they're not visible. We are not a large presence in front of the audience. So you want our gestures to match the size of the venue in which we're training. Okay, now, that being said, so we want to think about the magnitude of our gestures. Now I want to think about different types of gestures. So what is the message that we're trying to communicate to the audience at that particular moment? Are we trying to be expansive and talking about the big plans that we have for the next quarter, for example? Or is it that we want to pull people in when we communicate with them as leaders? Do you want to grab their attention and make them feel that from their heart that we care for them as leaders? Okay, so we can use gestures in that way to be expansive or inclusive. We can be open to our the people that we're communicating with if we open our palms. You've probably seen instructors that stand like this. It's a very closed look that they have, not particularly inviting, not the type of stance that would suggest that this person's open to questions or maybe any controversy in the classroom. And then also, in addition to that, they're also what we call directional. So we can talk about, okay, on this point, these are the key issues. In this case, these are the key issues. Okay, I would like everyone in this side of the room to work on project A. I would like everyone on this side of the room to work on project B. Okay? So, again, just to review, we have our primary stance, which is our feet shoulder width apart, one foot slightly advanced from the other, knees bent, but we're up just a little bit, and then we want to be standing upright. Okay? Now, so I'd like everybody up on their feet again. We're going to practice some of these gestures. Okay? All right, so adopt your primary stance. And again, it doesn't matter if it's right foot advanced a little bit or left foot advanced a little bit. Either way will work, whatever is more comfortable for you. And, knees slightly bent posture. Try to keep as upright as possible. And then just practice some big gestures. Okay, yeah, just, okay, you might have to step apart a little bit, so I don't want anyone hitting anyone else. But yeah, big gestures. How about an open palm gesture? How about an inclusive gesture? Okay, what about on this side, on that side? Now, it takes time for all of us, if we're not used to gesturing in a way which complements our message, which reinforces the underlying theme of what it is we're trying to communicate. So it takes a while for us to really work on this so that they become comfortable and natural for us. And we can also use these gestures to help control communication in the classroom. So, there'll be situations where you're going to ask a question, and you may have 4 or 5 people attempting to respond at the same time. So what you can do is you can also use your gestures to help control. So you might say, all right, who can tell me the 3 components of an effective leadership message? All right, Bob. Okay, you can do that. And then someone else maybe at the same time is trying to call. Okay, so you can gesture like this to Bob, right? And then to the other person you can go, oh, just a moment, without using the words. Okay, so like this. Just acknowledging that you're getting to them, after you get the previous comment, right? So it's a way of communicating and keeping control of the classroom without having to be talking to people all the time. All right. So Malik, you have one. Okay. Sandra, what was your idea? Okay. So you can see how I can use my gestures in order to control the flow of communication. So, all right, I'd like you to take a shot at this yourself. Okay. So go ahead. Just pretend, use your imagination, if you will. This course is all about kind of stretching, outside of your comfort zone, trying out some new things in terms of, how we can become more effective communicators and training facilitators in the classroom. So just practice, What happened here? Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. Sorry, the lights went out for a moment. So yeah, just, like this, like this, like this. Okay, come on in. All right. So gestures are extremely important. As we saw over here, the visual component of our message is 55%, over half of the total message, according to Dr. Morabian. And again, it doesn't, whether it's 55 or 45 or, 29 or, 63, that isn't the key point. The key point is that our visual component makes up a huge part of the message that we're communicating to our audience. And in order to be most effective in the classroom, we have to be aware of that. All right, go ahead and take your seats again. All right. So now, with that being said, okay, those are some better practices. Primary stance, upright, gestures appropriate to the size of the venue, using your gestures to, control communication in the classroom, maintain order, not have everybody calling out at the same time. Whoa, okay, come on. So I can use my gestures to do that. Now, at the same time, you've probably seen presenters who had distracting visual, practices. I was at a presentation in Florida being delivered by a professor from the University of Florida. He was a law professor, and he was talking about some workers' compensation law that I was working on at the time, and he wore glasses, and he had a big slide presentation behind him, and what he would do is he would say, "Oh, now as you can see in point number 9," and he went on to talk, and then he would change the slide and he'd go, "Well, now okay, as you can see over here." Now, oftentimes he'd say, there are situations where that's not true. And as you can see in that 4th bullet point, and he did this, this was a 2-hour presentation. Now, what do you think it is that I was doing while he was talking? Yeah, I'm busy. I have my notepad, my pen. I'm like ticking off the number of times he uses his glasses to gesture toward the screen. And it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. Wow, it's been 3 minutes and he's taken his glasses off 10 times. Okay. Well, of course, if I'm noticing that, what am I not paying attention to? Yeah, that's right, his main message. So we have to be cognizant of any distracting behaviors we might have, so that they don't provide that or create that interference, or some of that interference that we were talking about when we talked about the model of human communication. So here are a few different styles that I've seen before that can be, or practices that can be somewhat distracting. Okay, so one is the sergeant major, someone who walks around with their hands behind their back. Okay. And then, we have the opposite of the sergeant major, which is the fig leaf. And again, it could be another distracting behavior. We have the clicker, the person who has a pen in their hand and they're. Have you ever seen anyone like that? I have, too many times. I've seen, the clicker. They're busy. They a little nervous habit maybe of clicking. Okay. We have the change manager, the person who has like money in their pocket and they're like jingling it around or something. Okay. So, I mean, those are just a few of the distracting behaviors, and I guarantee you, after you've been exposed to this information, the next time you go to a presentation, you're going to be looking for these and probably start ticking things off, as I did when I was watching that professor from the University of Florida. So, those are some things to avoid. Okay, so again, just to recap, our discussion about our visual presence in front of the classroom. Again, according to Moravian, it makes up a large proportion of the message that we're communicating to our audience. We have some best practices when it comes to our posture and presence in the classroom, which is, as I mentioned, primary stance, upright posture. We want to make sure that we have our, and again, part of that primary stance, and I apologize, I didn't mention this at the time, that part of the primary stance is having your hands at your side. Right? Now that feels a little unnatural until you have done it for a while. So if you want to follow my example from years ago when I was brand new in the training field, I used to, again, watch TV, neutral stance, feet shoulder width apart, one foot slightly advanced, hands at my side. Just trying to get it to become and feel natural for me. And the reason why the neutral stance is so good, because then you can just gesture from anywhere, and your gestures are natural. And I guess one other thing I would say about gestures: try not to gesture in stereo, because that becomes a distraction as well. If you're always like this, like this, like this, like this, like this all the time. So practice gesturing with one hand, gesturing with the other hand. Okay, so. Excuse me, another thing to avoid. So, and then we can, again, as I said, we can use our gestures to to control the flow of discussion in the classroom, right? So that wraps up our discussion of the visual component of the presentation.